Святися, святися, Новий Єрусалимі, слава Богу Господня, на Тебе воссия, ликуй ныне и веселися Сионе, Ты же чистая, красуйся, Богородице, о восстании Рождества Твоего.
Okay, well, I'm back. I hope a little more successfully than yesterday. I apologize for that. There was a thunderstorm and the internet connection was lost for an hour or two. And I was knocked off the air, but I'm back to continue where I ended last time, yesterday. First of all, welcome. Thanks for showing up again. And this is really just part 2 of the same show. So I had gotten through the incorrupt saints before the internet outage. With the exception, I think I had just begun talking about the Carthusians. So I'm just going to pick up there and close out that little piece of yesterday's show, which is that the Carthusians, they're a very, very strict contemplative order. They've never had a reform. They still follow the same rules, so to speak, that they had at their founding in the 11th century. And their monasteries are quite small. They're strictly contemplative. They live a hermetic life, like hermits, in solitary confinement, actually, in their cells. And they only get together for matins and lauds and mass. And all the other offices they do alone in their cells, and they eat alone in their cells, and they observe strict silence and so forth. And the monasteries tend to have, I'm not sure exactly the rule, but somewhere between like 1 dozen and maybe 30 monks in them. They're small. And the cloister is built around a very small graveyard where the Carthusians who have passed away are buried. When they're buried, they are simply lowered into the ground on a plank, wrapped in a sheet, no coffin or anything. But the graveyard fills up over the decades. In fact, some of these monasteries, are 400 or 500 years old, so they recycle the graves. And every 50 or 60 years, they run out of space, and then they dig up corpses to use the space for the newly deceased monk. And very often, when they do this, they find that the corpse, in fact, is incorrupt. They don't make any deal out of this. They don't tell anybody. They kind of keep it quiet. and they just go ahead and I think they rebury the incorrupt corpse and find another grave to empty. And I actually don't know what they do with the remains of the non-incorrupt ones. But I have a picture here. And the reason it's of this monastery, this is in Gaming, Austria. This is a Carthusian monastery there. And they were doing excavation there. And in the course of excavation, actually the monastery was sold, which is why they were doing excavation there. But anyway, in the course of the excavation, they came across some incorrupt bodies of monks. This little description is incorrect because it says coffins, and they don't have coffins. But anyway, and the prior just informed the workers to simply rebury the bodies because it's part of the Carthusian charism. In some sense, it should be part of all of our Christianity, in fact, that nothing is about them. They want to be as anonymous as possible. They live a hidden, silent life alone with God, so to speak. And when they write books, traditionally, they don't attach their names to the books. So you'll find lots of books written by a Carthusian because they simply write the books anonymously. And in fact, I was in a Carthusian monastery for a few weeks. It was a very unsuccessful try at a vocation, but they don't use their names, or they use their cell numbers or their cell letters because they all have individual cells in the monastery. So I don't remember what my cell was. I think it was H. So when I would send a note to the kitchen saying that, I wanted a second loaf of bread or something with my meal the next day, I'd sign it, H. So anyway, that's how humble and modestly they wish to live, which is probably not unrelated to the number of incorrupt bodies that turn up in their cemeteries. Anyway, end of the incorruption. Remember, the point of this series is basically, it's summarized in this quote by G.K. Chesterton. I didn't believe in the Catholic Church because something pointed to it. I believed it because everything pointed to it. And that's why I'm going through just a hodgepodge of collected evidences for the truths of the Catholic Church. So there were incorrupt bodies. There were medical miracles at Lourdes yesterday. And now I'll go on to the main point of today's show, which is the apparition of the Blessed Virgin Mary at Guadalupe and the tilma that she left behind. So that's where we are now. And first of all, I'm sure you're all extremely familiar with this image. This is, of course, the famous Tilma of Guadalupe. And I will tell the story of its origin, of this painting, so to speak, totally miraculous, provably miraculous, and so forth. And there is the image of the Blessed Virgin Mary as she appeared to Juan Diego, an Indian peasant in Mexico in 1531, newly converted to the Catholic Church, 6 years a Christian, 6 years a Catholic, and he received the apparition. I will go into the story in a moment. The story is, needless to say, incredibly beautiful, and there's a lot to learn from it. And but I just want to set the stage a little bit. So there is the famous Tilma of Guadalupe, and let's see what we have here. This is actually the shrine today. It didn't look like that in the 16th century. It's a huge, they had to rebuild a huge basilica. Right above my screen of my face there, you'll see the old basilica there on the plaza, but it became much, much, much too small. They get 20 million pilgrims a year, so they built that huge new basilica. Looks a little bit like a newly landed spaceship or something, that houses, I don't know what, 50,000 people, 20,000 people, I don't know. But one of the wonderful things about my ministry, and the most wonderful thing is serving God, needless to say, but I do get to go to these wonderful places and, invited to speak and stuff. So there I am inside the spaceship, inside the new basilica at Guadalupe. It's only about 2 or 3 years ago, so I don't look all that different now. And you'll see that I'm at the foot of the altar, but you'll see at the top of the altar, You'll see the Mexican flag draped, and then you will see a very small image there, and that's actually the original tilma. That's there. The original cactus cloth cloak behind glass at the top of the altar. And there's a way one can pass quite close in front of it. There's like a underground room that you can go into and be pretty close to the front of the tilma underneath the altar. So that is Guadalupe today. And I'm making this a little bit of a tourist travelogue, but since I was the guest of the shrine, I got a little private tour, and this is actually Juan Diego's house. After the apparition, he spent the rest of his life in a little house attached to the basilica. It wasn't a basilica then, but attached to the church. Just a little hut where he would welcome and show around the pilgrims and so forth, and of course pray. So that's actually kind of an excavation, semi-excavation. That dirt floor there is actually the floor of his hut there. And then the Blessed Virgin Mary appeared on top of a hill called Tepeyac. I don't know the pronunciation, Tepeyac. And so here in this picture, what you see is the hill that she appeared on top of, Tepeyac Hill. There's another church built on top of the hill. That's the church on top of the hill. And then at the foot of the hill, you see still the plaza, the end of the plaza that you saw in the first picture. And I believe that's the old basilica there to the right there, that older brick building. So that's what things look like now. They're certainly not what things looked like then. Just for fun, let me see if I can pull up something. Okay, I know this is a little bit on the corny side, but maybe that's what things looked like then. I mean, obviously there was nothing there, and the Blessed Virgin Mary simply appeared on the top of a fairly barren hill to the Indian Juan Diego. However, back to the story. Maybe I'll leave that up there for a moment. Maybe not. Maybe, I don't know exactly how to introduce this, so I'll just launch in. Maybe I'll bring myself up there to launch in. Okay, there are a lot of really interesting things about the story. I will get to the tilma itself and how completely miraculous it is that it still exists and physically, and also the image on it and so forth, and a number of miraculous things about the image. But let me set the stage a little bit. That hilltop, Tepeyac, where the Blessed Virgin Mary appeared, was important to the Aztecs. Remember what was going on. This is now 1531. So what is it, about 60 years, 70 years since the conquistadors came, since the first Catholic missionaries expedition from Spain came and began the conversion of the Indians, the spreading of the faith to the New World. And when they arrived, of course, they found the Aztec civilization. And the Aztec religion, the Aztec civilization, was essence of demonic. It was as demonic as you could get. I think most of you know this. Estimates vary whether they had 50,000 human sacrifices a year or 250,000 human sacrifices a year. They had tens and tens and tens of thousands of human sacrifices a year. I will now turn to a little quote from a book by Warren Carroll that I can't recommend too highly. He was a very Catholic historian. He passed away recently. And he wrote a number of very engaging, very entertaining books, but they're all against the backdrop of spiritual warfare, because everything actually interesting in human history is against the backdrop of spiritual warfare. Because all of human history, of course, all of human creation is a battle between Satan and God for human souls. So it's not surprising that the geopolitical forces that dominate history are in fact a manifestation of the fight between Satan and Christ for human souls. That's where you get, how politically incorrect can I get? That's certainly where you get Marxism. That's where you get Marxist organizations, like some that we've seen very prominent in the news recently, one of them being Antifa, another one which I shall not mention at the moment, but the three leaders of whom are avowed Marxists. Marxism is a direct attack on Christianity and on Christ. Everything unfolding in the world is the battle between the forces of Christ and the forces of Satan. And so the entire continent of North America, Central America, I mean, it was all demonic religion. It was demonic religion in North America and the American Indians. It was very demonic religion in Central America with the Aztecs. And of course, when the Christian missionaries, Catholic missionaries came, it was open warfare between the forces of Christ and the forces of Satan. I'll talk a little bit about that on the show, actually. That's one of my excuses for talking about this stuff. I do have a couple of YouTube videos, long talks on the demonic and pagan religions, which this is going to draw from. But anyway, so back to Warren Carroll. The book that I'm referring to is Our Lady of Guadalupe and the Conquest of Darkness, which is about the spiritual battle between the Aztecs and the conquistadors. Another one of his books, which is really good, is Red Banner, White Mantle, which is about the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia taking place at the same time as the apparition at Fatima of Our Lady. And the third one, which is excellent also, is The Guillotine and the Cross, which is basically the satanic battle between the Masonry and the French Revolution against the Catholic Church at the time of the French Revolution. But anyway, back to the 15th century here. Every Aztec city had a central square from which a high pyramidal temple arose. Many primitive peoples have practiced human sacrifice, but none have done so on a scale approaching that of the Aztecs. There were at least 50,000 human sacrifices a year. It is estimated that 1 out of every 5 children in Mexico was sacrificed. 1 out of every 5 children in Mexico was sacrificed. According to a companion of Cortes, he was the first of the Catholic conquistadors leading the expedition. According to an account written by a companion of his named Bernal Diaz, in the temples, quote, "They were clay idols made of pottery with the faces of demons and other evil figures that showed Indians committing acts of sodomy with each other." This is, you'll see, this is all going to be woven together. This is all relevant. Among the Aztecs, quote, "Sodomy was virtually universal, involving even children as young as 6. Cortes also found sodomy to be widespread among the Aztecs and admonished them to give it up, along with human sacrifice and cannibalism. One of the Aztec gods, Xochipilli, was the patron of male homosexuality and male prostitution." Now, all of the pagan temples throughout history, pretty much, the satanic, demonic pagan temples, have had male temple prostitutes. Even in the Old Testament, I'm not making that up. Read the Old Testament. There are references, almost every time there's a reference to the pagan worship of Baal or the pagan worship of Astarte. There is reference to temple prostitutes, including explicitly male temple prostitutes for sodomy. I'll talk about why that's the case. This is not irrelevant. Herman Cortes, the conquistador himself who conquered the Aztecs, wrote to Montezuma, he was of course the Aztec leader, "I cannot understand how so great a lord and wise a man as you has not yet thought it out, that these idols are not gods, but very bad things known as devils. Not rocket science. They're very bad things known as devils." I am going to read, a quote here. So here it is. No, I will find it. This is a little bit of a different show because I'm weaving together things. But here's okay. So now not exactly a digression, but a little backfill. Okay, here's my argument. My argument is that the entire purpose of creation, God's entire purpose of creation, he created the entire universe, the entire world for one purpose, which was to be able to create immortal human souls to be with him in heaven for all eternity. Okay? Everything that happens in the physical world, much less on earth, is the unfolding of the battle between Satan and God for human souls. Now, Satan gets his power, the demonic gets its power from people serving the demons. One of the forms of that service is the human sacrifice and the explicit worship that we saw. But another form of the service is sin. And there's no question that the devil's power over society is fueled by the aggregate sin of that society. The sin of that society is even more valuable to the devil. It gives him even more gasoline in his tank, so to speak, if that is done in an explicit form of worship. But even if it isn't done in an explicit form of worship, if it's simply offending God and insulting God, it is giving power to the devil to influence the society. Now, there are all kinds of sins, and the devil is very happy with any kind of sin. But there are two sins that give more power to the devil than any other sins. There are two categories of sin which are uniquely valuable to the devil and give him a tremendous amount of additional influence over humanity, over the society. What are those two sins? And I'll explain why those two sins are of a particular value. One of those sins, well, basically, the two families of sins are human sacrifice and sexual depravity, sexual perversion. Now, why is human sacrifice and sexual perversion the two categories of sins that give the devil the most power? Well, if you think about what the whole purpose of creation was, it was to create immortal human souls for heaven. Human sacrifice, of course, destroys those immortal human souls and offers those human beings to Satan. And very often, the circumstance of the sacrifice itself will be designed so that the person is in a state of mortal sin when they are sacrificed to Satan. I'll give you a funny little example here. Are any of you old enough to remember Son of Sam, the mass murderer in New York City? I think he was probably in the early 70s. David Berkowitz. It's a very interesting story. David Berkowitz would run around New York City. He had an entire city of New York City terrified. He would run around New York City late at night, early morning, like 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning. He would go to lovers' lanes and he would shoot with a revolver and kill the couple engaged in the basically fornication in lovers' lane. These would be couples, teenage couples in their 20s in cars in these deserted spots. He was under the direct command of the devil. His witness testimony is wonderful. He's become a Christian, not a Catholic. And maybe I'll put a link to his witness testimony under this show, if I remember. But he was directly taking orders from the demons. I mean, he talks about it. There's no question about it. The demons were talking to him all the time and actually giving him power and giving him the ability, like superhuman strength in a sense and so forth, and telling him where to go to find these couples. Isn't that interesting? Because the devil knew that if he could get David Berkowitz, son of Sam, to shoot, a adulterous couple or a fornicating teenage couple in a car in Lover's Lane at 3 o'clock in the morning, they would be pretty sure to be in a state of mortal sin. Okay, it's just a little illustration. So, of course, human sacrifice is very important to Satan to give him power. Now, what's the most valuable form of human sacrifice? The most valuable form of human sacrifice is the sacrifice of a parent of their own child. Why is that the most? You see this in the Old Testament, by the way. You see it. Maybe I can find the verse, but you can see it in the story of the king of Moab. Maybe I won't waste too much time here. Oh, there it is. No, that's the wrong story. Anyway, 2 Kings chapter 21. The king of the Moabites sacrificed his son, his eldest son, to win a battle against the Israelites. Why is a parent sacrificing their child of a particular value? Well, it's not a coincidence that God is called God the Father, that we call God the Father, our Father who art in heaven. The entire relationship between the parent and child is a model of God's relationship with humanity. God is our Father. God is our protector. The parent, the father, the human father, is supposed to model God the Father, to be the parent, the protector, the nurturer, and the one who loves his own child, right? So when a parent kills their own child, it's not only human sacrifice, but it's a direct insult against the nature of God. You see, it's like spitting in God's face. It's like mocking God as the father of humanity, because the father or the parent is mocking their parenthood, their fatherhood or motherhood of the child. So now think about abortion. And what is abortion? Of course, abortion is, it's the slaughter of a totally innocent, guiltless human being in the womb of his or her mother, where, of course, it's particularly supposed to be nurtured and protected by command of its own parents. So just imagine the power that's giving Satan over our society. I'm convinced that's where everything is, one of the two places everything is coming from. That's, leading us, what's the expression? Sending us to hell in a handbasket, so to speak, or at least to the second coming in a handbasket. We're on this locomotive barreling down the railroad track straight towards the second coming. And it's coming from the power that Satan's having through abortion. Remember that statistic here? This is kind of cute. I'll pull up the slide. It is estimated that 1 out of every 5 children in Mexico was sacrificed. The estimate is that 1 out of every 5 children in the United States is sacrificed to abortion. Very interesting. The second sin that we have to talk about in the context of the Aztecs is sodomy. So why should sexual depravity, and in particular, if I may say so, sodomy, be of particular value to Satan and to the demons? Because remember, the whole business of demonic worship is it's an exchange, it's an economy between the human individual and the demonic world. And the individual or the society performs services that serve Satan, that please Satan, that give him power. And in return, Satan returns the favor, so to speak, by giving rewards to the people who are serving him. That's how George Soros got so rich, right? That's how Bill Gates got so rich. If you're in this commerce with the demonic or with Satan, you will get, I've mentioned this before, you'll get rich if that's what you'll want. You'll get tons of sexual partners if that's what you want. You'll get very good luck or very good health or tremendous sexual prowess or whatever if that's what you want. Because, Satan or the demons are in a position to reward you. And it's no skin off their teeth, because they will have you for all eternity in hell if the relationship continues until the moment you die. So anyway, why is sodomy so valuable to the devil? Well, again, remember, a parent sacrificing their child is this perfect insult to God the Father, right? What's the other perfect insult to God the Father? The reason God created us is so that we could cooperate with him in creating human souls for him. That's called marital relations. That's called spousal relations. That's why we have the sexual faculty. Our sexual faculty is, in fact, in some sense, I don't want to say it's the most sacred thing we have. That sounds horrible. But it is the one place where we most directly and intrinsically cooperate with God in his purpose for creation. That is the creation of immortal human souls. Not only that, God is dependent on us. God will not create immortal human souls except through the cooperation of man and women, obviously, using that faculty in the proper way to create immortal human souls. So to make a mockery of that faculty, to make a mockery of even the organs involved, I won't go into details. I told YouTube this show is not for children, so I guess I'm safe. To turn it into a use that is a really diabolical, demonic mockery of the use for which we were given it is, again, a particular insult to God. It's like not only hurting him, it's adding insult to injury, I think is the expression, right? The Curé of Ars said that impurity, sexual impurity, was such a horrible sin that the demons didn't even engage in it themselves. They just got us to engage in it. So anyway, so that is the context for this, okay? So I'll go back to that slide. Remember that sodomy, I'll just read this again, that the temples had clay idols made of pottery with the faces of demons and other evil figures that showed Indians committing acts of sodomy with each other. Among the Aztecs, sodomy was virtually universal, involving even children as young as 6. So there you have like a double insult against Charles' innocence. And the patron of male homosexuality was one of the Aztec gods, male homosexuality and male prostitution. That would have been, I suspect, temple prostitution. And now I am going to say where I got some of this information, because it's like, to me, it's really interesting. Okay, I got a book for my research. Do I have the name of the book in front of me? Oh yes, The Construction of Homosexuality by David F. Greenberg. Mea culpa, mea culpa. He sounds awfully Jewish. Probably is. He's University of Chicago top he's a top sociologist at New York University. The book was published by University of Chicago Press, which is like a really prestigious press. Now, here's the neat part. David Greenberg is an in-your-face proud homosexual. So he wrote this book defending homosexuality, showing how wonderful homosexuality was. And one of the bases for his evidence of how wonderful homosexuality was that of all of the religions on the face of the earth, certainly of all of the old religions on the face of the earth, only 2 condemned homosexuality, Judaism and Christianity. And in all of the other primitive religions, homosexuality was extolled and used in their worship. According to David Greenberg, this shows how perverse Christianity and Judaism was, and how not with the program they were, and how hung up they were. Because every other religion was in agreement of how wonderful homosexuality was. There's a good reason for that, right? Judaism and Christianity are the only 2 that came from God, and the others came from the bad guys. Anyway, so let me just tell you some stuff from his book here. That quote that sodomy was virtually universal, etc., was from his book. He also pointed out that among ancient religions, only Judaism and then later Christianity condemned homosexuality, and that every other culture of the time either approved it, embraced it, or used it as part of their religion sacramentally. He documents that these cultures that used homosexuality included the Iroquois Indians in North America, the Mayans in Central America, the Aztecs as mentioned, the Mesopotamians The ancient Egyptians, for whom having sodomy with a god was auspicious and a sign of man's mastery. Ancient Greece and Rome, Carthage, the Celts, the Gauls, Scandinavia, England, ancient China, where sodomy was performed in their shrines, Japan, Thailand, Indonesia, the Moguls, and both the Islamic and non-Islamic Arab worlds. Therefore, there's something very anomalous about Judaism and Christianity's disapproval. Okay. Wow. Okay, I hope that was worth the price of admission. Okay, so back to the Aztecs. I was talking about all the human sacrifice. On Tepeyac Hill, on the hill where the Blessed Virgin Mary was going to appear to Juan Diego, on that very same hill, there had been a temple to, I don't know if I can be able to pronounce her name, Tonantzin, the Aztec goddess of fertility, on top of Tepeyac Hill, okay? Put that in your minds. The place where the Blessed Virgin Mary chose to appear, chose to give her miracle, chose to introduce, in some sense, the Catholic Church to the entire Indians of Central America. The Apparition of Guadalupe resulted in within, I think it's 8 years, 10 million Indians coming to the Catholic faith. The place where she appeared to do all of this, the place where she crushed the serpent under her heel, was the location of the temple to this pagan goddess. Of course, we know how beautiful the Blessed Virgin Mary is. I don't think that the pagan goddess really could compete too well. Whoops. Boy, I do something a little bit wrong when I do this. I don't know what. Let's get that there. Okay. There is a Aztec original carving, whatever you call it, idol of that pagan goddess. I'll talk about it a little bit. I'll tell you some details about what that thing shows. But in any case, when her temple at Tepeyac was inaugurated, this is where the Blessed Virgin Mary appeared. 80,000 Indians were sacrificed in order to inaugurate the temple. Bear with me a moment. I'm sorry to do this to you. Bear with me one moment. I apologize for that. Someone picking up something at the door. Okay, so that's where the Blessed Virgin Mary appeared. Now, that statue that you're seeing there, here's a little description. On Tepeyac Hill, where Mary would appear, it had been a temple to Tonantzin, also known as Chuauacotl. That temple had been destroyed by the Catholic priests when they came there. She was known as the Mother of the Gods, or Our Mother. Does that sound familiar? The Mother of the Gods, the Blessed Virgin Mary, is of course the Mother of God, dogmatically the Mother of God. This is where the Mother of God was, I don't know what you say, crushing the worship of, negating, reversing the worship of the pagan Mother of the Gods. And a description of that statue you just saw. It's a woman with jaguar's paws and eagle's claws for feet. She had just been beheaded, as all women were, for the fertility rites. 2 streams of blood spurted from her severed neck and met as 2 serpents' heads. Waist to knees, she wore a skirt of intertwined snakes. Her chest was covered with a breastplate of alternating hands and heads with a skull pendant. So that was what was on top of Tepeyac Hill. Now, of course, Tonantzin wasn't the main of the Aztec gods. And so where will I go here? Okay. So Mexico, when it was under the domination of the Aztec religion, the gods needed human blood as a vital substance. Without it, the sun god wouldn't run his course. The sun wouldn't rise. The corn god would not ripen corn, etc., etc., etc. And failure to feed the gods with human blood meant destruction. I'm going to put in a little comment here. Just like, God forbid, abortion and sodomy should be illegal in the United States, that would mean destruction. That would mean destruction. All the causes, not to get political, but there is one of the major political parties in the United States. Their main causes are making sure that abortion is universally available and making sure that sexual depravity is universally embraced. And failure of those two things would mean destruction. It would mean destruction of Satan's power, which is why they're so hell-bent on preserving that at all costs. Let's pray. Let's pray for the upcoming election. Anyway, at the dedication of the temple in 1487, I don't remember which temple this was, according to the Franciscans, 80,000 persons were sacrificed. Juan Diego lived just 6 miles away as a child from Tepeyac Hill. And as I mentioned before, the Aztec religion, like all demonic religions, relied on two sins to feed the power of Satan: human sacrifice and sexual depravity. Mea culpa, mea culpa, mea culpa. Just look around. Just look around at what we're doing. If you want to wonder why Satan has so much power over our society now. Now, here is a contemporaneous Aztec drawing from the 16th century. There are lots of these. It's from a codex. The Catholic missionaries would have the Aztecs draw accounts of their ceremonies. So here we have a typical Aztec temple where you have the priest on top sacrificing the Indians, the river of blood pouring down, and they would just throw the body. They would take out the living heart. I'll give a little description in a moment. They would remove the living heart while still beating from the victim and offer it in sacrifice to the gods, and then they would just roll the corpse still warm. Obviously, the heart was just released, beating down the steps. And the statistics are incredible. I think it's something like they were able to do it in 20 seconds a victim or something ridiculous, 30 seconds a victim. Get them up on the altar, cut open the chest, get the heart out, roll the body. Next, please. And so let me find some more information. Okay, so here's a little description. When the Spanish conquistador Hernan Cortes and his men arrived in the Aztec capital in 1521, they described witnessing a grisly ceremony. So they were actually witnesses. Aztec priests, using razor-sharp obsidian blades, that's a stone, sliced open the chests of sacrificial victims and offered their still beating hearts to the gods. They then tossed the victims' lifeless bodies down the steps of the towering Templo Mayor. Sounds like it's major temple. I don't know if that's what it is. So there you have that drawing. And as I said, there is no shortage of these drawings. So because for some perverse reason I like this stuff, I have a bunch here. So some of them show the demons. Here you see the god there, who certainly looks like a demon. And you see the priests or the Indians. That's cannibalism. They would eat the organs from the sacrificed victims under some circumstances, I think to get their powers or to get their strength or whatever. You see actually the pots in the middle. I'm sorry, this isn't funny. You see that limb in a pot, and you see that head in a pot, and you see another limb in a pot. You see those three like cooking pots in the middle of the circle? So they're cooking up. I guess look, so these guys weren't so primitive. At least they weren't eating the meat raw, right? Which, by the way, was done no, I won't go into details. But anyway, in the Intifada in Israel, there were some cases of one side. Never mind. That's another story. But actually tearing apart a couple of Israeli soldiers and eating them, eating from their limbs, still bloody and raw, having just like torn them apart. Happened in Ramallah. A couple of Israeli soldiers were lost, and they stopped and they asked the PA policeman for directions. And you can see a video, or maybe there's still photos of what the result was, but it wasn't a very prudent thing to do. But anyway, so nothing's new under the sun. Here we have the Aztecs eating. At least they cooked them. And let me see if I can pull through these slides. Yes. So I have a bunch of these codexes, they're called, these old drawings. So here's another one. I'm not sure actually what it shows. I don't know. I can't read the text. So it doesn't look very good actually, but I don't know what's going on there. Here you have another one. Let me see if I can see too much. Can't tell too much about what's going on. It looks like you do have a church there. Here you have another one of a temple, of course. So you have the priest with a knife tearing out the heart at the top and the body being rolled down. And it looks like those people at the bottom are eating little morsels, but I'm not sure what's going on. Another one of a temple. There you have the demon god at the top, with those protuberant eyes and that headdress. And he's obviously being fed. Actually, you can see the blood pouring out of his mouth. I guess he's drinking the blood while that priest is tearing out the live beating heart. And another temple drawing, same story. Another temple drawing, same story. But it looks like they're actually cutting off limbs at the top, and those limbs are falling down separately. I'm not sure exactly what's going on there. That's what it looks like. They're dismembering him at the top while they're pulling out the heart. This one just shows the gods as demons rather graphically. And it also shows that jaguar totem. That's probably the topic for another day, the use of animal totems. Here you have another nice cannibalism one. You also actually, this is kind of interesting. You see the demonic gods. You see that animal god in the lower right corner, looks again like a jaguar or something like a jaguar. And you see the pot where they're cooking up dinner there in the central column on the bottom. And there we have the original one. So I hope that was enjoyable, kiddies. a little excursion into remember, by the way, just wait till I get to this part of this show. I'm going to skip around. It's more fun if I skip around. I may get in trouble. Okay, look. Mexico had this tremendous anti-Catholic revolution, Masonic. It was like the French Revolution. It had it in like 1910 to 1925. The government of Mexico ever since then has actually been anti-church, anti-clerical, anti-Catholic, anti-Christian. Okay? This is true. It's pathetic, but it's true. I'll talk about that if I get to it in the show. So the National Palace in Mexico City, okay? So, I don't know exactly what goes on there. It's like Congress, okay? It's the National Palace. I think it is where Parliament meets. It is a huge, huge building. And the heroes are the Aztecs and the Marxists, and the villains are the church. Okay, so let me jump to the end here. Okay. So here you have, I was there on this trip that I talked about. You can see the staircase at the bottom there. I'm going to yeah, I can't really make it much bigger. I'm going to try to make it a little bit bigger maybe. Hold on a second. Okay, let me see if I can make it a little bit bigger. Too much trouble. Can't, forget it. Sorry. Okay, you see the staircase? That is like, you know, think of like the Capitol building in Washington D.C. or something like that. This is a huge government building, like a whole city block, and that is a tremendous winged staircase that goes up both sides. And that painting is a huge mural. It's like maybe 100 yards wide or something like that. It's a huge mural. It was done by an artist named Riviera. I don't remember his first name. Something like Guido, but I'm not 100% sure. Maybe I have it in front of me in my notes. No, I don't have it. Anyway, he's a Marxist. He's an in-your-face, proud Marxist. This is the government building. This is the Mexican government self-image, so to speak, is this mural. And when you get up close to that mural, what you see is, okay, here's a little bit of a close-up. You have all these little scenes of the history of Mexico, okay? The good guys are the revolutionaries. The bad guys are the church. Do you see on the lower left-hand corner, you see the clerics, the auto da fe, the Inquisition, the burning at the stake of those poor victims of the evil churchmen who are, you know, reading scripture for them and condemning them to death and the flames licking up. Let me zoom in a little closer, so to speak. There, you see it? Those are the bad guys, those Jesuits. Those are the bad guys in the mural. And the Aztecs, with their human sacrifice, cutting out human hearts, you know, 80,000 at a time, are the good guys in that mural. I'm not joking. The good guys are the Marxist revolutionaries and the Aztecs. And it's all these bad guys coming from the Catholic Church that ruined all the good stuff that Mexico had before they showed up with burning people at the stake and telling them about God and you know, pouring cold water on their sodomy, if you excuse the mixed metaphor or whatever. Okay? That's what we're facing. And by the way, if the Marxist revolutionaries in the United States were to win, that's what we would be facing. Okay? Those are the two sides. You know, that's the French Revolution, the Mexican Revolution, and so forth. You know, it's not pretty. Today, go to Mexico City, you see this. I saw it. I was spellbound. You know, all I wanted to do was go from frame to frame in this mural, looking at the demons who were being lionized, who were being made the saints, and the saints who were being made the demons. Anyway. Okay. I have to get to Guadalupe. I didn't know this was going to be a tour of Mexico. Okay. So where was I? Okay, so I mentioned that 80,000 were sacrificed at the at the inauguration of that one temple, and they had a lot of skulls, a lot of trophies. They would have these huge skull racks next to the temple with huge numbers, like 130,000 human skulls. And I know you guys all believe me, because if you didn't believe me, you wouldn't be watching. But there is a photograph of a hillside. I think it's a side of a temple. I don't know exactly what it is. It's paved with human skulls. It's paved with human skulls. Those round paving stones, they're all human skulls. This skull tower, it's called a skull tower. I don't know how much of a tower it is. I don't know whether it's a pyramid or what. This skull tower has 130,000 human skulls. That is the wonderful, beautiful pagan religion that those mean Catholic priests deprived us of. Okay, gosh. You know, ask Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez who she thinks the good guys were, whether they were the Catholic priests or whether they were the Aztecs who were there before. And I don't think that her answer is going to be much of a mystery, okay? Little does she know that she would have been one of those skulls. But anyway, And of course, here is a surviving one of these temples. So that's what it looked like more or less when it was in use. And those ramps presumably would have been what the bodies were rolled down. Okay? Having fun, kids? Having fun, kiddies? R-rated show. Okay. So let's go on to the happy part. Okay, so that's all what the Blessed Virgin Mary came and stamped her foot on and eradicated with her, let me get to the drawing, with this very beautiful, 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 very beautiful apparition. So let me get to Juan Diego and the Tilma. Okay, now I better put myself back on the screen. Do I have time? Yeah, I'm going to spend time, a little time, reading the account, okay? The account of the apparition of the Blessed Virgin Mary to Juan Diego. The show is fueled with iced coffee. And most particularly so that I can read her words, because her words are unspeakably, unspeakably beautiful. And also because the apparition took place over 4 days, so to speak. So it's a little bit confusing what happened in the beginning, what happened at the end. It took place from December 9th was the first apparition to December 12th was the last apparition, 1531. So we're talking about just 11 years short of 500 years, 489 years ago. So I will read this account. The first apparition. Juan Diego awoke before sunrise. It was Saturday, Our Lady's Day, the 9th of December, the first day in the octave of the Immaculate Conception, 1531. And it was quite cold in the mountains of Mexico at that time of year. So he wrapped his cloak, or tilma, around himself, and he set out long before dawn, on foot of course, to the neighboring village of Tlachtolco, which was about 6 miles away, to attend morning mass. He would go to mass. He had been baptized 6 years earlier, and every Saturday and Sunday he would walk to mass, 24 miles all told, round trip. Not easy miles, around rough country. So he was on his way to mass, and it was still before dawn when he approached Tepeyac Hill, where the gory temple of the Aztecs' mother goddess, the mother of the gods, stood before the priests had it torn down. Suddenly his thoughts were interrupted by very, very wonderful music that descended from the top of the hill. It sounded to him like a mellifluous chirping of birds, sweetly singing, a melody that he had never heard, such as he had never heard, which became more and more and more enchanting. Is it I, he wondered, who has this good fortune to hear what I hear? Am I perhaps only dreaming? Is this perchance the earthly paradise hidden from the eyes of men? He was wondering. And then the ravished Indian squinted his eyes to the hilltop, where he saw a cloud glowing with dazzling whiteness just above the crest, while a magnificent rainbow was formed by its resplendent rays and emblazoned everything around it. Then abruptly the celestial singing ceased, and he heard a voice from within the cloud, an incredibly beautiful woman's voice, by the way, a young woman, a very tender voice, calling his name most affectionately Juanito, Juan Dieguito. So that's a very loving diminutive that he heard her speaking in his own Indian tongue, Nahuatl tongue, but the English of that diminutive would be closest to something like my dearest little Juan. So anyway, Juanito climbed up the rocky slope. As he reached the summit, the voice bade him to draw near, and he found himself face to face with a woman of incomparable loveliness, whom he described simply as a most beautiful lady. He did not name her at that time. He waited for her to name herself. Her garments shone so brilliantly that the entire mountain was transformed by the reflection of her glory. The rocks became like precious gold. The earth sparkled like emeralds and multicolored jewels. And even the shrubs and prickly pears were splattered with a sheet of color, as though their thorns had been changed into stained glass. She was young, perhaps 14, her expression most loving and encouraging. She motioned Juan to come closer. He advanced a step or two and fell to his knees, overwhelmed by her beauty. The lady spoke. "My son, Juan Diego, whom I tenderly love as a little one and weak, where are you going?" And he replied, "My holy one, my lady, my mistress, I am on my way to your house at Tlatelolco. I go in pursuit of the holy things which our priests teach us." He was going to Mass. Then the noble lady revealed her will, saying, direct quote, "Know, my son, my much beloved, that I am the ever Virgin Mary, Mother of the true God, who is the author of life, the creator of all things, the Lord of heaven and earth, present everywhere. And it is my wish that here there be raised to me a temple in which, as a loving mother to thee and those like thee, I shall show my tender clemency and the compassion I feel for the natives and for those who love and seek me, for all who implore my protection, who call on me in their labors and afflictions, and in which I shall hear their weeping and their supplications, so that I may give them consolation and relief. That my will may have its effect, you must go to the city of Mexico and to the palace of the bishop who resides there, and tell him that I have sent you, and that I wish a temple to be raised to me in this place. You shall report what you have seen and heard, and be assured that I will repay what you do for me in the charge I give you, for I will make you great and renowned. Now you have heard, son, my wish. Go in peace and use all of the strength that you are able to." I will just point out, I hope that most of us have made a consecration to the Blessed Virgin Mary. I'll tell a little story. I had a friend, a worldling, but anyway, his heart was very good. He was a Catholic. His name was Alex. And he was on the horns of the dilemma of whether or not to go through with the consecration to the Blessed Virgin Mary, you know, the de Montfort 30-day consecration. And I was trying to talk him into it. And he was worried that if he turned over everything to Mary, because you turn everything over to her, all that I possess, I know it in French, give me a moment. "I deliver and consecrate to you all my goods, temporal and eternal, and even the value of all of the good actions that I might ever perform, to be yours to do with as you wish." Not word for word. Anyway, I'm not going to... And so I was trying to talk him into doing it, and he said, well, he was worried that he'd get shortchanged, that he would give all this stuff to the Blessed Virgin Mary and get less in return. To which I said to him, "And you're going to be," excuse the expression, but as I said, he was a worldling, "you're going to be the first person in history who the Blessed Virgin Mary screwed." So anyway, meaning it in obviously the colloquial sense. And that convinced him, and he went through with the consecration and was very grateful. So here, even in her apparition to Juan Diego, the Blessed Virgin Mary says, "And by the way, don't worry, I will reward you very handsomely for your service to me." She rewards us very, very handsomely. Didn't Jesus say, "There's no one who has given himself over to me who hasn't received 100-fold in this life, never mind in eternal life?" So, okay, we're never going to be shortchanged by consecration to the Blessed Virgin Mary. And she made this clear already to Juan Diego. "Be assured that I will repay what you do for me in this charge that I give you." So, okay, anyway. Juan Diego bowed low in obeisance and said, "I go, my most noble lady and mistress, to do as a humble servant what you have ordered. Farewell." So, okay, then he goes to the bishop's palace in Mexico City to ask him to build the church there. So let me pick up the story. So he's walking along. By the way, at the time, the bishop had a visitor. This is now Saturday afternoon. And his visitor was the was the governor of Mexico, who was also a religious. He was actually also a bishop. I have his name somewhere. Here, I'll come to it. So anyway, so he's showing up at the bishop's palace, this poor, humble serf. He really was a serf, Indian, to go see the bishop. And as it turns out, oh no, the governor was in the next meeting. Never mind, I got that backwards. Okay, so he shows up at the bishop's house, says he has an urgent message. He gets let in. He kneels down in front of the bishop. The bishop greets him courteously. He was very courteous and gentle throughout this meeting. And Juan suppressed his nervousness and related all the wonderful things that had happened, repeating the message of Our Lady exactly as he remembered it. To all this, the prudent shepherd listened most kindly, without giving any signs of credence. And then Bishop asked Juan a number of questions, which Juan answered perfectly. But the bishop was not the type to dismiss such a matter lightly, but he wanted to check on the reputation of this Indian, check out his character, and he also perhaps wondered whether this might be a trick of the devil. So anyway, he obviously was not, buying it at the moment. Saddened by the obvious skepticism of the bishop, Juan rose to his feet, bowed, and left. Anyway, so then he returns. This is still that Saturday. He passes by Tepeyac Hill. He goes up Tepeyac Hill. He goes back to the Blessed Virgin Mary. He finds her just as glorious as before, waiting for him at the summit. Kneeling before her, he painfully acknowledges his failure. This is his words. O little one, most dear, my queen and most high lady, I did what you told me. Though for a long time I was not let into the bishop, I finally saw him and gave him your message just as you ordered me. He listened to me with kindness and attention, but from what I noticed in him and from his questions, I understood that he did not believe me, for he told me to come again, that he might at leisure inquire into the affair and examine it more closely. He supposed that the temple you demanded was an imagination or whim of mine and not your will. I therefore beg of you to send some noble and influential person, someone worthy of respect, to whom credit ought to be given, for you see, O my sovereign, that I am a poor serf, a mere lowly peasant, and that I am not fit for this embassy of yours. Pardon, O queen, my boldness, if I have at all failed in the respect due to your greatness. Far be it from me to incur your indignation, or to displease you by my reply. Looking upon him with the greatest affection, the noble lady smiled tenderly and said, Hear, my much beloved son, and understand that I am not without clients and servants to send, for I have many that I might employ, if I so wished, many that would do whatever they were ordered. But it much befits that you undertake this affair and conduct it. My wish and desire has to be accomplished by your means. So I ask you, my son, and I order you to go back in the morning and see and speak to the bishop. Tell him to erect for me the temple I demand, and say that she who sent you is the Virgin Mary, Mother of the true God. Anyway, so Juan Diego agrees to go back the next morning and try again with the bishop. So he goes home and he cooks supper and he's living with his uncle. And it turns out his uncle is extremely ill, falls very ill all of a sudden, and looks like he's in danger of death. So the next day, this is why I'm going through this, is because I get confused about the days. So that first, I just got to the end of Saturday. That was all Saturday. Saturday night, he goes home, he cooks dinner, he's living with his uncle. Everything is fine. Sorry. And then he gets up the next morning, Sunday morning, and he is, he went to Mass and religious instruction. And then he goes back to Mexico City to go back to the bishop's palace to try again to get the bishop to agree to build the church that the Blessed Virgin Mary has asked for. So this is now Sunday. It's the next day. He's doing it just as he was asked the day before. Go back tomorrow, go back to the bishop. So after Mass, he's going back to the bishop. Again, he's standing before the bishop's palace. He knocks at the gate, But the bishop's attendants, servants, are having none of it. And this time they treat him very harshly and insultingly and keep him waiting. Actually, they don't keep him waiting. They tell him to go away and yell at him. But he is stubborn and he doesn't go away. And he just keeps pestering them. And he finally ends up waiting for about 3 hours, being insulted, and finally gets let in to see the bishop. And the bishop is still very nice. The bishop didn't know that he was being strong-armed in the courtyard like that. So anyway, so Bishop falls down, Juan Diego falls on his knees in front of the bishop the second time and implores the bishop to heed the noble lady's request. Going back to the text now. Zamaraga, that's the name of the bishop, was embarrassed at this passionate display, and gently consoling Juan, urged him to gain his composure and answer his questions. What did the lady look like? Who did she say she was? Where did she appear? On and on the bishop went. He needed proof that she was indeed who she said she was, and not an illusion of the devil. They must have a sign, he told Juan. Such an expensive and laborious undertaking as the construction of a church requires much more evidence that it is truly the Mother of God who asks for it. What kind of a sign? Juan asked, unruffled by the request. Name any sign at all, and I will ask it of the lady. The bishop paused for a moment and said, let the lady herself decide it. And with that, Juan was dismissed. The plot thickens. So, losing no time, Juan Diego hurries back to Tepeyac Hill to tell the Blessed Virgin Mary what the bishop said. Prostrating himself before the heavenly queen, with great anguish he poured out his heart. No one had believed him, though he tried his utmost to convince them. Only a sign would move the bishop to act upon the lady's request. So as a last gesture to please his queen, he asked her if she would not give him some sign. Then he would surely succeed in fulfilling her desire. The beautiful lady, in tones of deepest appreciation and gentleness, thanked her childlike emissary for his efforts. She then promised to give him the necessary sign, saying, so again, these are her words, so be it, my son. Return here tomorrow in order that you may secure for the bishop the sign for which he has asked. When it is in your possession, he will believe you. He will no longer doubt your word and suspect your good faith. Be assured that I shall reward you for all you have undergone. Again, she doesn't shortchange anybody. Go now, tomorrow I shall await you again here. And Our Lady sweetly added, do not forget me. I think she added that because she knew what was coming. So, okay, so this is where Juan goes back home, back to his uncle, but now his uncle is at death's door. He became very sick, and he sees his uncle in this terrible condition. So the next day, which is Monday, when he was supposed to go back to Tepeyac Hill for the sign for the bishop, he doesn't go back at all, but he stays home nursing his uncle, taking care of his uncle, who is dying. His uncle says, go quickly and get a priest because I'm about to die. So the next morning, Juan Diego gets up early in the morning, not to go back to Our Lady, but to run to the nearby village 6 miles away where he goes to church and fetch one of the priests to come back to give his uncle the last rites. So that the priest could, so that the uncle could confess and receive final anointing, the last rites. So very early before sunrise. So now we're on Tuesday because Monday was that lost day where Juan Diego was nursing his dying uncle. So this is now Tuesday morning, December 12th. Juan Diego races off to the village trying to avoid Our Lady because he has to be quick because his uncle's about to die to get the priest for the anointing. Very early, long before sunrise, Juan Diego hustled off on his way to find a priest. It was now Tuesday, the 12th of December. As he drew near the hill where he had spoken to Our Lady, he could not afford to be detained at this time. He had not a moment to lose, or his uncle might die without a priest. So he decided to skirt the hill on its opposite side, a much rougher course, in the hopes of avoiding a confrontation with the lady. He thought to slip unseen by the eyes of she who sees all. But as he passed by the hilltop, he could scarcely believe what his eyes saw. For ahead of him he saw the Holy Virgin in a blaze of light, gliding effortlessly down the slope on an angle, so as to intercept him. So she was coming barreling down the hill, so to speak, floating on a cloud of light from the hilltop to intercept him, to present herself, smack dab in the middle of the path he was taking around the back of the hill to avoid encountering her. "My dear little one," she called to him, "where are you going? What road is this that you are taking?" Utterly confused and at a loss for an explanation, he resorted to pleasantries. So what does he respond? "My daughter, my dear little one, God keep you, my lady. Did you sleep well? And how is your health?" So he's trying to make small talk to get out of the pickle he's in, right? Anyway, he recovers his presence of mind quickly. And then she replies to him, these are the words that we should have. I have them in my wallet. These are the words we should have on the walls of our house. Like a mezuzah, that Jews have, the words that they acknowledge going in the house and leaving the house. We should acknowledge these. I used to have a banner actually in my house, right inside the front door, with these words to remind myself. Straight from the Blessed Virgin Mary. "Listen, and let it penetrate your heart, my dear little son. Do not be troubled or weighed down with grief. Do not fear any illness or vexation, anxiety or pain. Am I not here who is your mother? Are you not under my shadow and protection? Am I not your fountain of life? Are you not in the folds of my mantle, in the crossing of my arms? Is there anything else you need?" Basta, enough. Anyway, she again paused, gazed sympathetically at him, and continued, "Do not let this illness of your uncle worry you, because he is not going to die of his sickness. At this very moment he is cured." And he was. After these soothing words of encouragement, Our Lady ordered Juan to climb up the hill, and there at the top he would find the sign the bishop needed. "Go, my son, to the summit of the hill. There you will find a large variety of flowers. Gather them carefully and assemble them. Then bring them here." So how can this be? It's the middle of winter. There are no flowers in bloom. But anyway, all the foliage had dried up, but he goes up to the hill, trusting her word, and he sees a brilliant panoply of the most exquisite flowers, including Castilian roses. The bishop was from Castile. There were no Castilian roses in Mexico. Blossoming in the frozen soil. Juan, of course, was struck with amazement. As he had been directed, he carefully gathered as many of them as he could fit into his tilma, right, this cactus cloth cape that he was wearing, and brought them down to where the Blessed Virgin Mary was at the foot of the hill to show to his queen. She then took the flowers and with her own hands rearranged them, a very beautiful motherly gesture. He's a guy, right? He just threw them all in the tilma. She sees, "What have you done? Come on." And she rearranges them beautifully. She rearranges them in the tilma as only a woman can, saying as she did so, "My little son, these varied flowers are the sign which you are to take to the bishop. Tell him in my name that in them he will recognize my will and that he must fulfill it." He knew he was from Castile. The Blessed Virgin Mary knew he was from Castile. He's going to recognize the Castilian roses, right? He's going to buy the whole thing. Anyway, so she then sent Juan Diego on his way after first telling him, "Don't let anyone else see what is in the tilma until you show them to the bishop." Anyway, he goes to the bishop's palace. They treat him worse than ever, really badly. Just yelling at him to go away and everything, and threatening to use force to throw him out. So Juan Diego pulls back, and as he recoils, a little crack opens up in the tilma, and they see something weird inside the tilma. They actually caught a glimpse of the flowers. So one of the attendants rushed to the bishop to tell him what he saw. Now, at this point, the bishop is in there with the governor of Mexico also. So the most powerful two people, actually, on the continent at the time. So anyway, This attend rushes the bishop to report the phenomenon. The bishop, this is the first time he had heard that Juan Diego was outside again, immediately tells the attendant to bring him in at once. And so Juan Diego finds himself standing before the governor of Mexico and the bishop, and he felt all the more nervous, but he had a special grace of the occasion of not being scared, and he bowed reverently. He didn't kneel because he had a holy grip on the tilma, so he bowed reverently, and he recounted before the listeners the entire story of what had happened at Tepeyac Hill, how the lady had promised a sign, how she told him to climb the hill where he would find the flowers, how she had rearranged them in her own hand, and telling him to take them to the bishop, and that he would believe the story at that point and not let anyone else see them. And the bishop listened with rapt attention to every word he was saying. And then, having finished the story, Juan took a deep breath and, reaffirming his grip on the corners of the tilma as he clutched it for the last time to his bosom, his voice strengthened and he said, "Your Excellency, here is the sign you asked for." And he throws open the tilma. And opening his hands, the tilma, the end of the tilma falls open, and from it, the celestial bouquet of multicolored flowers, mingled with Castilian roses, tumbles out, cascades softly to the floor before the two dignitaries, and perfumed the room with a heavenly aroma. But that's not all, because at that point, the bishop jumps to his feet, totally startled, and stares at the roses. But as he lifts his eyes from the roses to the tilma, what does he see, of course, but the miraculous image on the tilma? So let me get to that. And here we have it. I don't want to be in this. This is too good. Okay, so there we have a painting of Juan Diego having opened the tilma, and the roses tumbling to the floor, and the bishop, in the full majesty of his office, standing there and looking not only at the roses, but at what we know as the image on the Tilma of Guadalupe that is still there behind the altar 500 years later. Okay, that we all know so well. So that's basically the story. And how can I do this? How can I do this? I know how I can do this. Okay, let me bring back that slide with me in a little caption. And that's basically the story. The bishop totally believed Juan Diego. Within 2 weeks, he had a chapel built at the site. And eventually it turned into the shrine we know of today. And during Juan Diego's lifetime, he was given a little hut adjacent to the chapel where he lived and served as a tour guide. Not a tour guide, a prayer leader, a pilgrimage guide. And he could worship there. Must have been a wonderful life for him, and pray and tell people the story. So that's it, basically. I just want to glance. Oh, yeah. Okay, there was a miracle, another miracle that took place there. I won't go into it. There are plenty of miracles. Having to do a dead Indian came back to life. And then 10 years, within 10 years of the apparition, okay, let me back up a little bit. Before the Blessed Virgin Mary appeared there, the missionaries had succeeded in converting only about 1 million Indians. I don't have the number before me, how long they were there. I think they were there about 60, 70, 80 years at the time. They had only brought about 1 million Indians into the church. By 1541, that's 10 years after the apparitions, there were 10 million Indians who had been brought into the church. Remember, the Virgin on the tilma is an Indian maiden. And here is the account of a missionary at the time. In other words, an eyewitness to this conversion, Father Taribo. Quote, Had I not witnessed it with my own eyes, I should not venture to report it. I have to affirm that another priest and I myself baptized in 5 days 14,200 and odd souls. Okay, so he and another priest in 5 days baptized over 14,000 souls. This was going on probably for most of those 10 years, resulting in 1 million conversions. And supposedly, the Indians, when they heard that there was a priest come to the village, they would be lined up. They would be like storming, the teepee he was in or whatever, just lined up, begging for baptism. Entire families would be pleading in tears to be made Christians, making frantic gestures to have the water poured on their heads. So that's what converted this continent, okay? The Virgin of Guadalupe. But I'm going to have to end in 10 minutes. So let me get to the miraculousness of the tilma, the cloth itself, okay? This tilma that you see, that cloth, is a very rough woven cactus cloth. It is woven of agave cactus fibers. There you have an agave cactus fiber. There you have an agave cactus. And here you have some of today's cloth. It's like burlap that's actually made from the agave cactus. Here you have some Indian ladies actually weaving the cactus cloth. And, okay, so that's the story of the cloth. Now, that cloth, maybe I'll pull this up again. That cloth, left to its own devices, lasts about 5, 6, 7, 8 years before it disintegrates. And that's under normal conditions, not having candles and incense burning in front of it all the time and people touching it and kissing it and all these things that would make it last less long. There was a cynic a non-believer, let me find the account here. Okay, so normally that cloth would last 5 or 10 years. Now, for the first 116 years, it was not even behind glass. It was exposed to everybody touching it, everybody kissing it, everybody, touching objects to it, and also the soot and the heat from the candles and strong nitrous fumes given off by Lake Texcoco, which was right nearby. That's the first 116 years. Then some glass was provided for it, but it would be sometimes on and sometimes off. And then in the 1780s, okay, so it's already like 260 years later, a cynic, a skeptic, Dr. Jose Ignacio Bartolocci, had copies made, same cloth, painted images on them, and he hung them around the same place so they'd be exposed to the same conditions. And he did it to show that they would last anyway. The joke was on him. They didn't last anyway. After 7 years, the fabric was disintegrating, the colors had changed and deteriorated, and the paint was flaking off and the goldwork was flaking off. They didn't even last 7 years. And the tilma itself has been there and is still there 490 years later, 489 years later. Okay, the existence of that fabric, the existence of the tilma itself is inexplicable and miraculous. The image on the tilma also, let me get to that. The image on the tilma is miraculous, but let me go through step by step. Okay, in 1778, there was a workman who was cleaning the silver frame around the image with nitric acid, and he spilled a bunch of the nitric acid on the cloth. I'm sure he felt like committing suicide on the spot. He just destroyed the most precious thing in North America, right, with his clumsiness. He was sure the cloth would be destroyed. However, there were only some slight stains on the upper right corner that can still be seen. Okay, so that's actually a miracle. And then in 1936, a Nobel Prize chemist, Dr. Richard Kuhn, that's a Jewish name. Kuhn comes from Cohen. He found that the colorings of the image were neither animal, vegetable, nor mineral. The problem is that doesn't leave anything except synthetic, and synthetic dyes didn't exist before 1850. So we had this image produced in 1531 with pigments or dyes that don't exist. They're neither animal, vegetable, or mineral. And then another scientist in 1963 was struck by the fact that the front of the tilma, where the image is completely smooth, like photographic film. The back of it is still that rough burlap cloth, and yet there is no sizing on the tilma. In other words, there's no, like plaster or anything that was put on the tilma to change the texture from the front to the back. And there are no apparent brushstrokes. So the image is miraculous. There were some additions made to the painting, by the way, to the image on the tilma. I don't remember exactly what they were. Maybe if I pull up an image of the tilma, which I don't have in front of me actually. I think the angels around it weren't on it or something like that. So there are some later additions, but the image of Our Lady, there's no explanation for. And another miracle, I told you about the Mexican Revolution. Whoops, wrong slide. Never mind. This is the right slide. Okay, in the aftermath of that revolution, a revolutionary... I'm going to skip that. This is just details about the revolution. I don't have time for that. It was horrible. It was the worst persecution of the church since the reign of Queen Elizabeth in England. After the Reformation, priests and religious were slaughtered wholesale. Masses had to be done secretly. Like I actually have a picture here of a secret mass being done. In the woods or in the wilderness somewhere. The priests were, it was at the risk of the priests' lives that they were caught. By the way, a wonderful novel, The Power and the Glory by Graham Greene, describes this period, this anti-church Masonic revolution. Anyway, so there was one of these would-be revolutionaries who wanted to destroy the tilma. So he pretended to be a devotee. He goes up to the tilma in the basilica. This is the old basilica. You could get up very close. You could get up in front of the altar, and the tilma was right behind the altar. As a matter of fact, I'll show you no, I can't show you a picture. There's too much going on. I'll show you a picture anyway, okay? So this is what the basilica looked like in those days. You see behind the altar, you see the tilma. And then you see, this is of course pre-Vatican II, needless to say, this is 1920. You see the altar, the marble steps, and he placed a bouquet of flowers in a vase right in front of the altar, containing, drum roll please, 29 sticks of dynamite. 29 sticks of dynamite in a pot of roses, right in front of the tilma, in front of the cloak. The explosion demolished the marble steps of the main altar. It destroyed the marble rail. It completely destroyed the church's marble altar. It bent a brass crucifix, which was in front of the image. I'll show you a picture of that crucifix. It blew out not only the windows of the basilica, but the windows of buildings hundreds of yards away, and yet the tilma suffered no damage. And here you have a picture of a bunch of the faithful admiring the bent crucifix. The bomb bent over that heavy metal crucifix like that, but it did not damage the tilma, which was right behind it. And that crucifix, that bent crucifix, it's still there at the shrine. You can see it, you can venerate it, there it is. So another miraculous aspect of the bombing or of the tilma. And just for fun, here you have a picture of the ardent young Mexican revolutionary who did it. Okay, that's that. I'm pretty much at the end. However, I have to mention two other miraculous aspects of the of the Tilma. Now, I am going to mention them because they are all mentioned a lot, but they're not my kind of miracle, is all I can say. My kind of miracle, I like miracles that don't have any possible explanation, materialistic explanation, including incredible coincidence, okay? If there's a 1 in 100,000 chance that it's a coincidence, I skip it, okay, as a miracle, because there are enough miracles with zero, like not even a 1 in 10 million chance of it being a coincidence. So I might as well stick with those. And the ones I'm going to mention now, to me, are the 1 in 100,000 chance that it's a coincidence. Okay, here's one of them, that the stars on the cloak of the Tilma show the dawn sky for December 9th, 1531. And they show the constellations as they would have been seen from Tepeyac Hill on that date. And here you see an image of the Tilma, and you see the star map overlaid on the stars, and it looks like it is a good match. And okay, here's a kind of explanation of what you're seeing there, of the red stars are the stars that you can actually see on the Tilma, and you can see the constellations drawn on the schematic on the right, and you can see the Tilma on the left. And of course, if you overlay it, so to speak, you get that. Okay, so I believe that this is real. I don't know what the probabilities would be, but my guess is that if a mathematician calculated it and just placed stars in a artistic pattern on the Tilma, and then calculated the chances that it might fit this well with the constellations, I don't think it would be a 1 in 10 million chance. It would be one heck of a coincidence, maybe. Anyway, I just want to be honest to both sides. I want to be honest with you. I don't want to hold back and not tell you about this because it's in a lot of books on Guadalupe, but I also want to be... I'm not like those other guys. I only say things that I 100% believe in. And I don't want to bet my salvation on this. I'm happy to bet my salvation on the Eucharistic miracles and so forth. Another one of the miracles that's cited a lot recently, scientific miracles about the Tilma, is that if you take a photograph of the eye of the Blessed Virgin Mary and enlarge it tremendously, it will show you an image, I believe it's an upside down image that has been put right side up here, of what looks like Juan Diego. So you can see it outlined in red, the image of what, a slight Indian man with a beard would have looked like. So some people say that's an image of Juan Diego. Maybe it is. Maybe, again, it's just, 1 in 10,000 coincidence. That the spots under that microscopy, look that close. So there you have it. I think I got to the end, and I even got to the end with my preaching about pagan religions and abortion and the Democrat Party and everything else. So I'm just looking. I don't think I skipped too much. I think I have a moment. I want to give honor. It's certainly worth looking into. There is a picture of Saint or Blessed Miguel Pro. He was a martyr of the Mexican Masonic Revolution. He was a Jesuit priest who was serving the thing about these revolutions, whether you're talking about today's brouhaha going on with, BLM and Antifa, or whether you're talking about the Bolshevik Revolution or the French Revolution or the Mexican Revolution, it's not a revolution of the people, for the people, and by the people. The people don't want it. The people want to be Catholic. They didn't want to be atheistic Masons. Same thing in the French Revolution. The people wanted to be Catholic. The same thing in the Russian Revolution. The people wanted to be Orthodox Christians. It's the elitists who decide that in the interests of the people, we have to destroy the church. Miguel Pro was being besieged by people who wanted to go to Mass and wanted the sacraments. But anyway, he was assassinated. He was arrested. He wasn't tried. He was given a death sentence without trial, and he was martyred. And there you see him facing the firing squad. This is from a contemporary newspaper. And in his left hand, he's holding a rosary, and in his right hand, he's holding a crucifix, and he declined the blindfold. And what he said when he was shot was, I hope I have it here. Yes. Okay. He walked, this will be the close of the show. He walked from his cell to the courtyard and the firing squad. He blessed the soldiers. He knelt. He briefly prayed quietly. He declined a blindfold. He faced his executioners with a crucifix in one hand and a rosary in the other. He held his arms out in the form of the crucified Christ, and he shouted out, "May God have mercy on you. May God bless you. Lord, you know that I am innocent. With all my heart, I forgive my enemies." And before the firing squad had a chance to be ordered to shoot, Pro raised his arms in imitation of Christ and shouted the defiant cry of the Cristeros, "Viva Cristo Rey, long live Christ the King." And when the initial shots of the firing squad failed to kill him, you see this a lot with the martyrs, right? Like the Roman martyrs. They have to try to kill him over and over again. Apparently the initial shots of the firing squad failed to kill him. So a soldier approached him and shot him at point blank range to assassinate him. And the anti-Catholic Masonic leader of Mexico at the time, Calles, who was incredibly cruel and horrible, he had to look down from his palace at a throng of 40,000 people who were lining this humble priest's funeral procession on the way to his burial. 20,000 were there at the burial ceremony itself without a priest present, because of course a priest wouldn't be allowed to be present. So you see again where the heart of the people lie and where these Marxist revolutions from the top come from: the devil. And I've already mentioned the names of some of his agents who are behind, very consciously behind. I'm going to say this, of course I have to say it. What's going on right now, excuse me, with the masks, with the threat of vaccination, with schools not being supposed to open in the fall, with rallies forbidden unless they're Marxist rallies, in which case they don't even have to wear masks. But should they be for a Republican candidate, they'll be arrested on sight. Church services. How many of us don't have restrictions on the churches? Are still, everything's wiped down. God forbid, the host is dropped at least 2 inches into your palm in, I think it's Massachusetts and stuff. It's coming down from the top. It's coming down from these same people. The instructions, this was plotted long before December in 2019. You can look up, what was it called? Agenda 201? Is that the name of it? Back in the autumn, I think it was in October, when Gates and, the representatives of the CDC and everything, planned this out. This, I don't think it'll succeed, but this was a planned Marxist revolution of some sort, to destroy Christianity, to destroy the church, to enshrine the power of the enemy in this last bastion of Christianity and freedom that's defending the entire freedom of the world, which is the United States right now. Just look at the EU. Just look. Brexit wouldn't have happened without the United States. Brexit wouldn't have happened without Trump, frankly. The entire I'm sorry, but it's like Atlas, right? The entire freedom of the entire globe right now, dare I say it, in my humble opinion, is on the shoulders of the current president of the United States. Otherwise, we're under the thumb of the Soroses and the Bill Gates and the communist Chinese and their biological warfare labs and everything else which we're seeing. So, on that cheerful note, let's pray for the second coming to come quick. That'll show them. Anyway, stay tuned for my next show. Thank you for watching. God bless you all. Bye for now. Oh, let me pull up the closing screen. And here's those beautiful words from the Blessed Virgin Mary for my closing screen. Oh my. I don't have music? Oh.